Okay, we are recording.
Thing then. Maybe do you wanna like include the early laughter in this recording? I think that would be good.
Should we restart it or leave it?
No, just leave it in. It's fine, man.
Okay. Um, all right, so this is our first one of these actually officially. And John and Dan, I put together an agenda, and I found it helpful, at least in the past, for working with product managers to have, even if we don't use it every time, but to prompt us to sort of think things through other perspectives, to question our bias, or to um, allow for people to chime in different ways. So I put these. One of my inspirations for doing that, my last job, was these 6 thinking hats, where the idea is you walk through and you say, okay, think about this now. Do we have all the information we need? Think pessimistically, think optimistically, things like that. It's just a way for us to, when we talk about something and it sounds like we're all being really positive about something, to break it down and say, okay, well, now what if things didn't go well? Or, is there another creative solution? It's just, for me, it's helpful to prompt those conversations, especially since I tend to talk too much already. Does that sound good? We could try it. Okay. um, all right. So seeing that, I have these issues here in the Google Doc. There's a link to the board as well. The first item here is the determine a path towards complete for the container registry. This issue was opened up a couple of weeks ago. After we started looking into what needed to be done for the container registry to take it to a complete and lovable maturity. And Dan and I realizing that we had some limitations on the architecture. And so we gathered a bunch of information from tickets that have been updated throughout the past 2 years by Camille and Jagorish and Stan, and put them all in one place so we can have a helpful discussion on what we need to do. And Dan and Steve have been in those conversations with different people, weighing through those options. And the goal for this issue would be to make a decision in 12.2, or at least to continue that conversation and have some decision that we make in 12.2. This would not get the direction tab. It wouldn't show up in the kickoff document. I don't think that we have any trackable work that will be, or code that's being contributed as part of this. This is just an architecture decision for now. But yeah, let me open it. Let me stop talking and open up for questions or comments.
Yeah, I think right now, one of my action items right now is to sort of follow up and keep this conversation moving. I think my concern here is that people have all kind of had an opinion. No one's really moving, but everyone seems to be being quite polite about it, which is great. Polite's good. But ultimately, I have to make a decision around how we're going to move forward. Was potentially going to do a POC, acronyms, to do a proof of concept, writing code to sort of start just supporting push inside the dependency proxy. Since we already support pull in the dependency proxy, because obviously that's kind of the function of that, is to have the thing, the package that we're trying to get, the dependency inside the dependency proxy, and pull it. He's thinking about implementing just a simple version of a push inside the dependency proxy to sort of validate, or at least in Rails to validate that this is possible and isn't a huge deal. Given that that's not a huge deal, I think the only major outlying concern that we have right now is the performance. So when we get to a point where we're using, if we were to go this way, if we're using the object storage, our standard object storage for these big blobs that we're actually uploading, we're going to have at least the long-running processes of doing those uploads and downloads in Workhorse, which means our split is a little better across Rails and Go. So there's a bunch of factors here. Right now, unless there's some again, making the assumption right now that Camille is actually moving forward with doing that, and I need to follow up with him. Realizations in that process that suggest otherwise. I'm ready to make a call to say we move forward in that manner, rather than trying to fork and build and deal with the whole side of things, which I think does sound somewhat complex, of forking and updating our own version of Docker distribution registry. So I feel like 12.2 is a good point for that. Does anyone have any questions about how that's set up and what's actually going on there?
I think I'm pretty clear on what's happening. I'm just, one piece of information that I just wanted to share is that I found from the user research so far is that our internal developers don't really think about this problem too much. They're more worried about, sorry guys, I have to shut off my video because you keep freezing. And for the customers that I've interviewed so far, they are able to use our garbage collection method for their server because they don't have the same dependencies, at least the customers I've talked to so far. Sorry, thank you. They don't have the same restrictions that we do, where we can't shut down GitLab. We can't put the whole container registry in read-only mode for a week or however long it would take. So they're able to actually use, our customers seemingly are able to put the registry in read-only mode or shut it down completely and run garbage collection. So the urgency behind helping our customers to run inline garbage collection may not be as severe as it is for us. Just worth calling out. I would still need more validation for that, but so far from the users I've talked to, they're figuring out how to untag images and delete them in garbage collection.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point. And it does, I think in my head at least, it doesn't speak as much to us as being an exception, although we are in a lot of regards. It more speaks to the scale of the issue. Once we get to a certain point, it becomes unreasonable to switch over to a read-only mode for the time it takes to actually run the garbage collection and cleanup process. You're talking hours, days, even longer potentially with the amount of data that we're using, and how big the manifest files have got in our implementation.
That makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to share that so I didn't feel like I was holding something back or not sharing this piece of information. I think it's worth noting and just worth being aware of. So thinking creatively, are there any other solutions that we should investigate?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of people weigh in on possibilities. I think the only thing that I wonder about is just the priority of this work. And I understand the financial impact of it. So I get that that's part of the reason why we're pushing this work forward. But if we sort of are generally coming to the conclusion that this is really affecting us more than anyone, with a couple of notable exceptions, I'm just not going to mention any names, but with a couple of notable exceptions, we're generally finding that it's really us with this biggest issue. So is there some workflow around this that sort of just addresses the problem? I think a couple of ideas that popped to my mind were what we were discussing briefly yesterday, Tim, was if we can't rebuild these images that are currently in our store from the repo because we've deleted the branch that they came from, do we actually still need the images anyway? So like, what are we really saving with all of this data? Now, obviously that's the big question, is like, how do we clean this up? Because there's a lot of unused data in there, but I just wonder if we're really thinking about this in a GitLab-y way of what is the actual important thing? What is the product? Is it the repo itself, or is it the image? Is the image a function of the repo? Is it just an artifact of the repo or an appendage of it, or is the image the actual end product? And so I wonder whether we've really, as a company, sort of worked out what what actually is the important thing. So that to your question yesterday, I think, Tim, was, if we delete the branch, do we need the image? Is it relevant anymore? So I think that's somewhere where I'm not really sure of an answer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm hoping to answer those questions with the user research that we're conducting. And actually, we have a conversation with the infrastructure and distribution team tomorrow, so we could ask them some of these questions more directly in that call as well. Okay. And I guess I would just confirm, we understand the goal and how this fits into the big picture for this issue.
Steve, question marks? Or are you good?
I think I'm good. I mean, I'm personally still kind of learning the overall, like, how this works and what the problem is initially caused by. But yeah, certainly from what I understand so far and from the various viewpoints that we've heard, it certainly makes sense.
Okay. For me, the big reason that this is important, one is the immediate urgency of the deletion story and retention and expiration policies. But thinking about some of the more advanced use cases like auditing and security scanning and whitelist approved and banned dependencies, things like that, it seems like we can't get to those things without first storing the data and having more control over the registry.
Yeah, and geo is the other use case.
And geo, thank you. Okay. Okay, so for 12.2, we feel good about making a decision.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's necessary.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the second issue is a new one. I'm not sure if everyone has seen this one yet. Steve, I know you're working on the NPM, and maybe Dan, you set it up. Currently we're forcing users to generate their own OAuth token for use with our NPM product. It's because NPM insists on using OAuth tokens only. So originally talked to the managed team. One of the developers on that team, Imre Farkas, sent over a bunch of notes detailing about we actually do support OAuth token with our personal access token. We're just not using the proper headers. And so there's some way that we can modify the headers and allow and support OAuth with our personal access token. So this issue, I summarized the problem, but a lot of the content I'm taking from Imre's note in another issue, which is also linked in that, is linked in that particular issue. Let's see, that's like 62295. But this unlocks our ability to support personal access token for the NPM registry, which is one of our critical blockers for our current NPM implementation. Is this clear? Have you had a chance to read through the issue? Are there any questions?
This will probably end up being something that, as long as we keep it in 12.2, Steve, this would probably end up going to you. So now's a great time to ask questions if you're not sure.
Yeah, no, this makes total sense. I mean, it's very obvious that that's something we need to be able to update. I mean, the first thing I tried to do when I started, because I had an NPM issue, was set up an NPM package with my personal GitLab, but I already had two-factor auth, so I couldn't really do it. So that makes total sense as to why we need it. And I read briefly through the issue and the connected ones, and what the various notes that are left seem to make sense about the headers. Certainly, I think the people that wrote these notes know a little bit more about what's going on in the GitLab code than me right now. But I briefly looked at that section of code and where the changes need to be made. And yeah, so far everything makes sense.
Cool. My one concern, trying to put on my non-optimism bias hat, is that this doesn't do anything to support us for CI job token. And I'm not sure if this moves us in that direction at all, or if it's a totally separate thing that we're going to have to wait on in the future. But this is the one thing that I'm concerned about, is that we may make this change doing this sort of small patch, and then we have to go and redo things anyway. But I think that's the GitLab way, is to iterate and provide some value.
Yeah, it might be worth making a note in the issue of that. I didn't think of that. I mean, I'm still learning of the various tokens, but I'm guessing that will be something that needs to be addressed.
I'll do that. I'll make a note.
And I think it's reading through this, it looks like this would be backend only. Can we add the backend label to this as well, just to so folks are aware?
Yes.
Ninja labeler.
It's also the GitLab way to just do it.
That's right, bias to action. Okay, cool.
And the one thing I would like to call out about this particular issue, Steve, is that we have actually a point of reference for the person who did the work, and you also have links to people who had done looking at that. But I think there's like a fairly clear path to follow to sort of be educated in how it all fits together. So I think that's good.
Yeah. And I'll definitely be reaching out and chatting with them as I get started, because in reality, this doesn't just affect NPM. It's a site-wide access token and a site-wide OAuth token. So I want to make sure I fully understand anything that it's going to have an effect on.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of also curious about how UX thinks about, or how we're sort of planning the future in terms of what access rights we grant. If I could just use my personal access token to do all of the things, there's not very much granularity in terms of what access we're giving people around those personal access tokens. And I'm thinking more in terms of like organizations obviously saying, well, we only want this account to access, the container registry or the NPM registry or whatever it might be. And I wonder if we're sort of thinking that far ahead, and if there are, I mean, it's not super relevant to this, but it's just something to occur.
I think it's a great point. One of the things that I've been considering is right now, the way the personal access token works is you set the scope for the token when you create it. So you say it has API rights or repository read or write access. I think there's space for us in the future to create special scopes for the package registry. So read package registry, write package registry. That's in line with what GitHub is doing with their personal access token for their product, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and I would suggest from a purely security focused standpoint, you want to be able to limit access as much as possible to reduce the potential impact of losing tokens or having a breach. It's that model of saying, well, we only grant the very minimum, and that way, if there's any problem with it, then the impact is reduced. The surface area is a big concern there, right?
Just a heads up, we're considering a similar approach for the visual review toolbar on the verify side, creating a personal access token for just that specific piece. So that kind of aligns with that thought process.
Oh, that'd be cool. Can you let me know how that goes?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. That'd be great. Okay. Anything else on the OAuth issue? All right, so moving on. The next issue is about collecting data for our stage. Currently, we have one metric that is included in the corporate SMAO dashboard. It's just whether or not the container registry is turned on or off, I believe. So this is the our SMAO metrics, basically how I define them, and we could iterate on this as a team.
Tim, sorry to interrupt. SMAO could.
Oh, sorry. It's monthly active users. I forget what the S stands for though. Something monthly active users. I should hopefully no one.
Something is an S word. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully Jason isn't watching this video and it's cringing. So I walked through basically each category. So the container registry, the dependency proxy, and the package registry. What are the different pieces that we would want to track? The aggregated column, you could ignore. A lot of this information is already being captured as part of the usage ping and snowplow. So really it's page views, it's unique users. For the container registry, it's counting key events like Docker build and Docker push. It's counting each time that an image or a tag is deleted from the UI. It's counting a number of API calls from using the container registry API. If possible, the number of times that garbage collection is run, either in read-only mode or in with the -m option. And then going to the package registry, same thing. Page views, users, tracking when number of Maven deploys and npm pushes, packages deleted, number of visits. So it's pretty all-encompassing, and maybe seems aggressive for one for one milestone. But it would be great to start tracking these, even if you said, oh, we're only getting 3 of these this milestone, and we could bump the rest of them to the next one. It'd be great to start tracking this, because this is tracking data, and having these dashboards is on all of our corporate OKRs to start tracking the stage data. So I really don't want us to fall behind. And for me, it'd be much better to be making decisions based on data versus I guess this is important or I guess this is highly used or something is wrong. So I think it'd be valuable for us.
Yeah, I don't have any questions in my mind that this is really valuable. I guess I'd be concerned about sort of really being careful about what our expectations are for 12.2 in terms of how we deliver on this specific issue. For me, I don't want to, in the case that we have some metric that's obviously there already, so we can start including that. If we have a metric that we can add fairly easily, that might be sort of something we could do and then also add in 12.2. But if there's stuff that we have to go research and figure out where we need to add it, that could be a fair bit, quite a bit more involved in terms of an engineering effort. I don't know if you've worked with any of this stuff before, John. I know you've been here the longest out of everyone in this meeting, so I wonder if you've had experience with these reports.
No, not too much, honestly. I was kind of reading through the issue. My question was what the deliverable would be for this after the initial chat. So yeah, sorry, Dan, probably not super helpful.
It's a great question. Like that is basically what I'm asking as well, which is like, okay, well, what's deliverable for 12.2 in this? Because that will help us understand what efforts involved.
Yeah, for sure.
And just from my understanding, this is one of those, I think, these Periscope for the dashboards. Would those queries be written by like the package team, or is there another team that's in charge of all of those reports?
I think the goal for this milestone would be to start tracking the data. So the success criteria would be, we are now tracking these metrics. Separately, there is a data team that could help with updating the Periscope dashboard and reports. Some teams are writing those queries themselves. I have some SQL skills, but it's been a bit, so it'll take me a minute to get back into that. But people have offered help to help build those dashboards. If it helps, what we could do, maybe the smallest iteration of this is to just start tracking the page views. So any page view to gitlab.com/container registry, or to /packages, or to the different page view options that are there. That would give the executive team a sense of a better sense of SNOW than what they have now of monthly active users. But it's not for us the complete picture that we want, but it's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that might be a good approach to select some of these metrics that are actually fairly clear. I think if we're just dealing with SQL query updates, then I would just have us do that ourselves. I've got a fair bit of experience in SQL over the years, and I'm sure we can figure that out. But if we sort of just look at some of these metrics that are pretty easy, that'd be a great place to start. I think the other thing that I have in mind here is if we have it fairly simple metric, we also have a team member joining on the 8th of July in a couple of weeks. So having some tasks for that person to start on would be valuable, and this could fall into that if that's like a simple metric to sort of add.
It seems like page views might be the easiest thing then, because it is just that there's a pretty straightforward answer to that. I don't know. I could be overstepping my bounds here and saying that's easy.
Well, and I don't have enough context to tell you whether it's easy or not either.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Steve does, and I'm not sure that John does. So I think at this point, if we break it into the smallest possible chunk and then add it, and then we can sort of treat that as either an onboarding issue that is long if it ends up being more difficult, or an onboarding issue that is really short, and then we can sort of work through that way. I think that probably makes the most sense.
What if I add a column to this table that basically just says priority, and just make all of the page view items P1s, and then go through and put P2s and P3s behind the other ones, and then we could just work through the list in that order. That works? Okay. So.
Yep. I did the thumbs up. Sorry.
I was looking at the issue. That's why I thought I missed something.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was giving the thumbs up and not talking, so that sounds good to me.
Okay, I'll make that update to this, and we'll keep it in 12.2. And when our new engineer starts, this could be an issue that they pick up.
Yeah, I think looking at the list, I'm assuming most of this data is easily accessible. The only ones that I really have any concern with are things that are event-based, and whether or not we currently, log that somewhere, because obviously if we don't, then that makes it a bit more complicated to begin tracking. So that's just sort of the only thought I have on possible issues we would run into as we go through each one.
That makes a lot of sense. How can we de-risk that? Is that maybe is there investigation that needs to happen into each metric?
I mean, especially from our current team standpoint, just not necessarily knowing where this data exists, then the answer would be yes. We have to find where the data is before we can determine how easy it is to put it on a chart. And if something is just in a table in a schema or somewhere else that we can pull really easily, then we can just check it off as we have the data and it's ready to go. So that might be a column to add to this, is just maybe a checkbox of we know where the data is and we have access to it, and we've verified that.
Yeah, in that vein, I agree with Steve. I think the order of complexity is really into 3 buckets. It already exists. It's well known, like page views. We really just have to update the report to show that data that we already know is there. Secondly is data that we don't know is there. We have to go investigate where it is and what it looks like. And thirdly is data that as we go to look and investigate, we realize it's not being tracked at all. And then we're going to actually have to go add those metrics, incrementers and stuff into the actual code base, do a release, and then be able to get it into the schema and then be able to get it into a report. So those to me are the 3 sort of orders of magnitude or levels of difficulty that we have. Some of those we won't know until we actually start looking into it, though, or identify which of our unsure metrics are, and then sort of reach out to members of the team that probably may or may not already know, and say, hey, we don't know about this one. Is it already there? ? If it isn't, where do we add it? And those are going to be the way we figure that out. So I think if we can identify the priority ones, the easy ones, like the page views, and then the other ones we might have question marks, and we just have to do some investigation to determine what the level of effort those are.
That makes a lot of sense. I think for the page views, nothing's being tracked, but it's an easier story. It's like updating one line in a file. But for Steve's exactly right. For things like how many times was Docker push run, probably needs to be updated in the code somewhere. And a little bit harder. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but it sounds like it'll be harder than the page views. Okay. I have some notes here. I'm going to update with the column. I'm going to add in priority and whether or not the data is currently being tracked, so we could update that as a team and have a quick view as we work through the issue. Cool. The next issue is, we talked a little bit about in a roundabout way with the OAuth discussion, but this is actually adding support for the personal access token to the NPM registry. We've been blocked by the OAuth issue. So the proposal here is to, once we enable OAuth, to basically just update our documentation to show that we support it. I believe what we would have to do is update our sample npm-rc file and show the new headers for the new token. But there might be other things in there that need to be validated and tested and make sure that it works.
Tim, can I jump in for 1 second?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sorry. I have a 2:30 my time I need to drop for. So just to add in real quick, the last two, sorry to jump ahead, but the two front end issues that are here, they should be good to go from our perspective. They're tentatively assigned to Nick already. They're just not marked as deliverable. As wanted to give everybody a chance to talk about those. But I need to drop for this other meeting.
Okay. That makes sense. So no concerns, and of course, if anything comes up, just let me know, and I'm happy to work through it. But I think they're UX ready. Then Amelia created some designs and stuff too. So
yeah, I think we're in a really good place. My only question would be is if Nick is able to get through these issues, if we have any other front end focused work, we'd want him to pick up in 12.2. Just on the off chance he's able to work through those before I get back.
I will look at that list. I'm sure that we have something small, but I don't know if that we have any major work that's design ready or anything like that right now.
Okay.
On that note, we have the designer starting in 2 weeks, so hopefully we'll start to be able to increase our throughput.
Okay, awesome. Sorry to hijack the call for a second. I just want to make sure I'm not super late to this next meeting.
Yeah, we should have front loaded those two items, man.
No worries at all. All right, well, thank you all. Yeah, this has been super helpful. Thank you all so much, and I will see you on the next call.
Okay, cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah, and on that note, I think we sort of, in terms of a new team member joining and having Nick sort of getting up to speed, and Steve, I feel like everyone's doing awesome work, by the way. I want to be careful that we have a couple of items in mind in case we get ahead of where we expect to be at the end of this release cycle, this milestone. Just a couple of items like bugs we're going to need a couple of quick fixes for our new engineer to get into. And then I think Steve may get through a couple of more things than he did the last time around, since I think Steve is a bit more up to speed after a month or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think like right now, since I'm only kind of working on one thing at a time, when I'm sort of waiting on things, I have time that I could be working on other things, but right now, obviously, I'm just still learning a lot, and that's what I'm using my time for. But
yeah, it's valuable use of time.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about having the extra time right now.
Yeah. Was that API issue a good first task, do you think?
Yeah, I think the API issue was like a perfect initial task in terms of size and scope. It was just big enough to kind of get me looking at a little bit of code, make a fairly small change, and then go through that merge request review process. Because I think that's sort of the most important part initially, is not necessarily like, writing a lot of code, but getting quickly through that, like into that process to get familiar with the GitLab way of doing things, and getting comfortable with talking to reviewers in the MR and talking to maintainers and just having those conversations asynchronously. Okay.
I have two issues like that I could bring forward and just put in the milestone. One is for the ability to list the containers at the group level, which we don't currently have. It's only listed at the project level. And another one might be something similar to that. I have to find them. And so I'll groom those. I'll just add in some color this week, and I'll let you know when I post them into 12.2.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So we were talking about the supporting NPM personal access token. Any questions or comments on this one?
No, this feels like it's fairly well discussed as well. So it seems like there's a good amount of information that someone can grab. So whether that's Steve picking it up or whether our new engineer will start looking into that as a sort of a first issue, it might be a little big for that, given the history of it. But either way, I think it looks fairly well discussed, and there's players here that talking about it that people can reach out to. So,
okay, that sounds good.
Just one side question for my reference. So with the OAuth issue and this access token issue, would those fall into like a security issue that would need to be reviewed because or anything like that? Because I know that part of the merge request sort of checkoff list is, if it's a issue that has anything to do with security, it needs to be reviewed by someone from the secure team. I'm not sure if maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but I wanted to see if these fall into that scope.
I would guess yes for the token issue, probably because we're updating the headers for our personal access token. Imre would be the best person to ask probably. He's like a senior engineer on the managed team. So he might be able to say, no, it's okay, you can make that change. Or he could say, yeah, loop in this person, they're the best person to talk to.
Cool.
Nice. And Steve, it's great that you're seeing how these things impact NPM and Maven. I really like the idea that we could be ending up in some idea of how to create parity across our integrations and potentially define a path for how we just methodically add new integrations over time. We talked a little bit earlier, big picture, about what's, in terms of a revenue perspective, what's important, what's not. These integrations are highly requested issues, and a lot of customers are saying, I will upgrade if you support NuGet, or if you support PHP, or you support this. So could be something that if we could first figure out, we end up at this place that's like, okay, we all agree this is sort of a decent product that we can support and we're proud of, and now we know how to move things up to that same level. So if you could think about that as you're working on the NPM issues like you've been, it's really helpful. And we could just continue to talk about that and work towards that.
Sure.
Okay, just a couple more. This one is more of a front-end issue. It's the improved discovery and navigation for GitLab features. It's worth talking about that this came from, this had been being talked about for a while at GitLab. It raised in importance again when we launched the dependency proxy, and Sid and Dimitri were asking, why do we have 4 separate main navigation items for package features? So this issue aims to combine all of them into one banner. So there's a group level, which will have dependency proxy and list. Eventually we'll add the container registry group view to that as well. And then there's another piece of it that's adding in basically packages and then container registry and list. So you'll be able, it'll all be combined under one nav. It's UX ready, and you could read through it. Are there any questions or concerns about doing this?
nope, that one looks good to me. That's documentation effort too, right?
There was another one. The next one's the basically. Oh, where did that other? I lost one of my issues. Okay, I'll find it. There's another one that's about changing the documentation format to match this. So like our documentation currently lives under, you have NPM and Maven for the user guides, but combine it under one package registry guide. And same thing with the admin docs. And I don't want to butcher his name, but our technical writer, Axel is his GitLab name. He said he's planning on working on that in 12.2. Cool.
Cool.
The next issue is more of a documentation effort. So Nick actually made the front end changes for this. What's been happening is if you have a special character in your project name or group name or branch name, and then go to navigate to the container registry, you get a 500 error. You get just no explanation on what's happening, and it's really bad user experience. And we get a bunch of issues that are created every week that are saying, I landed here, I get this 500 error, what's happening? So we cleaned up the front end for it to add in an empty state and to tell the user, you may have encountered this error. Go click here to the documentation for more help. So the front end is taken care of, but I was hoping that we could create documentation that just walks the user through. Okay, now you're in this position. How do you resolve it? And I'm not sure that it could be as simple as you have to go and navigate to here and change your group name, or you change your project name. But we should probably test that. And I've seen some users where they say that doesn't work. They had to go and reset some setting or restart the registry in some cases. So I think just some documentation and a help article would be really valuable, because we see a couple of issues per week for this.
Is this, I haven't looked too much at this, but is this specifically the group name itself, or is it the path, like in the URL, that's breaking it?
It is the path, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, like I have a sample project where I have my, it's called like underscore container registry, and it breaks because the path is created off of the name. But then if I go in and manually change the path, I could fix it. Okay. So it is in the path, and it's problematic for branch names as well. So I think just the idea of, we don't necessarily have a fix for this in the short term, because it's based on all of the reading that I had done. There's no easy fixes in terms of, maybe there is, I don't know. But I thought at least if we can have a help guide, so when it happens, people are aware of what happened. So if it happens in the UI, we point them to this help guide. If it happens in an API, we could, they could still get to that. And if it happens from CI/CD, same thing. They could find an article that tells them what this error means. It's not a very sexy feature, but I think it's really important that we help our users in this way.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps our users, doesn't that make it a sexy feature?
Yeah, boring solution, as GitLab would say. It's one of our values.
And so you have looked into if there are ways like to warn the user if they're adding special characters, or if they're creating a registry in something that already contains special characters, and that just seems like it's very complicated right now.
Yeah, there's a separate issue. I think I linked it here. It's not. I'll link it in there. But when I first started thinking about this, I created a lengthy issue about how we could warn users with like a JavaScript warning. But as I started to go through it, I realized that like there's no way that we'll ever build that, because projects and groups can be created from LDAP, they can be created from CI/CD, they can be created from an API, they can be created from the UI. So the warnings didn't really seem like it was going to make a significant impact, and it would. So in this case, I'm like, let's just do the smallest thing possible, which is just update some documentation.
Cool.
I'll find that other issue for you, and I'll link it in there as well.
Yeah, I was just curious. It reminds me very much of what I just ran into this morning with the changing the names on a path for NPM or Maven projects.
Yeah, that's it. When you said that, it instantly made me think of this issue. So I think if we have it across things, but maybe as we think about documenting it, a solution will become more clear.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'm curious now. You said you were able to change the path on a group that contained a container registry.
Mm-hmm. I could show you. Let me pull
Yeah,
up.
maybe. I mean, we might take this on afterwards because I know that when I attempted to do that, an error came up that said you cannot change the path because it contains a container registry.
Yeah, because so that's true. It was before I had pushed any images, I think. Once you
Oh,
push an image,
yeah. It's
all bets
once
are
there's
off.
tags. Yeah, you can't change the path once tags exist. That's what it was.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Good
So
to
I
know.
just one more issue. Oh, and this one will be quick. So the last issue is assigned to me, and this one is about the user research that we're doing to answer all these questions we've been asking about the container registry. So the goal is, we're making this investment. We're spending a lot of time talking about how to build the next phase of the container registry. And Dan, you said something really impactful to me yesterday, which is just because Go Harbor or Docker is solving it this way doesn't mean that's the way that we should solve it. We should really think about the problems that our users are facing and how those are relevant for us, because we have a different product than those other companies that are just building a container registry. So that's really my goal in doing this research, is for figuring out what are the problems and how can GitLab present something that solves those problems for the users that's unique to GitLab, or follows, in some cases stands on the shoulders of giants, I guess, and follows the lead in some ways. But I think we're going to find some unique solutions and some boring solutions.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've been thinking about and I really respect GitHub's approach, in that GitHub's approached it in a GitHub-y way, and they're not really doing what everyone else is doing. Now, we have a different product, and so therefore we're not going to make the same choices that they will. Nor have I had my beta access still hasn't been accepted.
Yeah.
My personal account, I'm like, I still want to see it. So I don't know, obviously, but just that concept of like, I think it's a boring and fast way to just say, let's do what other people are doing. And so we have Docker Distribution Registry working on a way, doing a lot of the stuff with the container registry. That's great. But I think as we start thinking about where we want to go with this product, I think it's really important for us to say, well, hang on, what are we actually trying to solve? Now, we might support Docker Hub or whatever it might be. We might support that protocol, but that doesn't mean that our users are going to have the best experience if we just implement the same way that other companies do it. So I think that's something that I don't have answers for, obviously. Otherwise, I would have said them or suggested them, perhaps. I don't know how best to help with that, but as I've been doing, I've been trying to connect you with people I know who I feel like can add value to that exploration that you're doing.
That's perfect. That's really helpful. And my goal is to meet with 3 internal people and 7 to 10 external people for this initial round. And then that will help us to build a hypothesis and some ideas. And then once we do that, we can turn that hypothesis into something that's testable, and then go and talk to users again and see if it's meeting their needs. Okay, well, I realized we went 10 minutes over. I think I must have thought we scheduled this for the full hour or for 50 minutes. So thank you for hanging on for the extra 10. This was great. I really appreciated this, and something I've been missing in my first couple of months here. So I'm really happy that everyone's on board and now we're working together as a team.
Yeah, and let's action items from this. We need to split up a couple of tickets. And we also need to identify some sort of smaller items to help people with onboarding tasks and any overflow that we have, or extra tickets or issues, still learning, that we can have assigned to peeps as they sort of get through this milestone.
Okay, so action items, good point. I have a few. I could just read them off to make sure we're on the same page. So I want to make a note in the OAuth issue that just about CI job token and how that's the next priority and something to consider. I'm going to update the data issue to add in a priority column and whether or not the data is currently available. I'm going to groom and update the 2 container registry API issues for our new hire that's starting in early July. I'm going to link to the other issue just for background for the special characters that I opened and then closed. And then I'm going to look for some small front-end issues for Nick in case he finishes those other 2 early.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think we probably want to, I definitely think it's worthwhile to have a couple of items in mind because I feel like Steve will only get faster and faster as he's getting slowly or quickly, as it turns out to be, up to speed.
Yeah.
So we might want stuff to pick up because, Steve, I'm looking at it like, I want to give you the time that you need to be able to sort of learn what you need to learn. And that's awesome. But maybe a good way to learn is in the context of doing some work that will give you a little bit more of a framework to work around as well. So just having as an option would be good if we have a couple in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely the type of person I learn a lot by doing, and I'm not afraid to be like, I'm doing this, but I don't know what I'm doing. Someone help. I'm not afraid of that kind of thing to happen to me. So
that's awesome.
And that's why you're doing such a great job. Thank you.
So one other thing that slightly related, slightly not, just in general, as myself or any of the other engineers, open up issues from various merge requests that, like a discussion just leads to a new issue of some type. Should the idea be that, I add package labels and then assign it to you, Tim, for, reviewing and prioritizing?
I think it's up to us. What I've seen so far with Dimitri is as he's worked through issues, he's naturally had to create separate, smaller issues for himself. Those don't always get the same level of this is a feature proposal and it has the problem to solve. And so I'd say if you have an issue and you create something, you could CC me and we can go from there. It could be that I can go in and make sure the labels are all up to date. I could go in and just clarify the problem to solve. But if it is something that's like a purely engineering task, maybe it wouldn't get the same, it doesn't need the same level of detail. I think we could treat it on a case-by-case basis and see how it works. I guess that's my...
Okay. Yeah, I think my main thing with that is, if it is just something small, that's kind of like I don't have time for this now, but I need to do it at some point. Just sort of making, I guess it would probably be you, Dan, aware that, that's going to be part of the schedule at some point.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. You can include me on, so maybe what the best thing is to just paste it in the package channel so everyone can see it. And then, if I have questions, I could ask in the issue, like, is this urgent? Will it be done with the upcoming milestone?
Yeah. Cause like the one I think of is that, the fact that you can change the path on NPM and it causes there's an issue there because the user doesn't know what's going on, but they can't do anything. So certainly on the NPM side, if it's small, then I'll just do it and add it into this milestone along with the existing issue. But I've identified that also is true for Maven. So I would probably create a separate issue, even if it is a very fast and easy issue, and kind of put that aside until there's time to get to it again.
Yeah, in this particular case, I think it makes sense to call out the generalized problem and then have issues underneath or related issues that are NPM fix, Maven fix, and then sort of break it out like that. But I honestly, if you're sort of approaching this as, hey, I think I can get to this fairly quickly, I don't really mind how you structure it. I don't want to be too pedantic about that type of thing. Okay. But the only thing to think about is going forward in this scenario, when we have people in different parts of the world, we may want them spelled out a little more clearly in case someone else is going to pick it up and they're going to want context and all that sort of stuff. So the big thing is, as you're doing that work, do what makes sense to you, but just try to remember that we got other people that are trying to contribute and participate in what we're doing.
Cool.
Great. Thanks again, everyone. Is there anything else that we should talk about before we wrap? No. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll post the video to the channel as soon as it's uploaded.
Thank you very much,
Awesome.
Peeps.
Bye.
Bye.